The upscale fitness center in Beverly Hills pulsed with the morning energy of Los Angeles's entertainment elite. Amid the sound of treadmills and curated playlists, Sofia Martinez adjusted her designer workout gear and gave herself a quick once-over in the mirrored wall. At 28, she had carved out a successful career as a talent agent, representing actors and musicians and navigating the high-stakes world of Hollywood with practiced ease and sharp instincts. Her morning workouts at Lead Fitness weren't just about staying in shape, they were networking opportunities. The gym was a magnet for producers, directors, and industry executives, all of whom could impact her clients' futures and her own. "Sofia, darling, did you see the Variety announcement about the Rodriguez film project?" asked Isabella Cordova, gliding over from the elliptical machines with the polished smile of a well-trained industry insider. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, a familiar exchange of casting chatter, production updates, and the constant stream of gossip that fueled Hollywood's social machine. Sofia felt at home here among peers who understood the delicate balance between business and personal branding. Near the weight machines, a tall black man in understated workout clothes moved with quiet confidence. He wasn't wearing designer gear or seeking attention, yet his physical presence commanded quiet respect. Sofia noticed him. So did Isabella. "Who's the new guy?" Isabella whispered, nodding toward the man whose calm strength and composed demeanor set him apart from the usual gym regulars. "No idea," Sofia replied, her tone casual, dismissive. "Probably security for one of the Elithers, or a trainer, scouting for wealthy clients." Her quick judgment reflected how she often categorized people by their relevance to the industry, their connections, their social utility, not by who they actually were. "Hello, Stop Racism family. So glad you're here with us today. Before we dive deeper into this story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your state or country in the comments. Your support keeps us going, so don't forget to like and leave your thoughts. Let's keep building this community and pushing for change together. Back in the gym. Sofia's perspective on relationships had long been shaped by her mother's hard-won lessons as a Latina actress navigating Hollywood in the 1990s. Carmen Martinez had taught her daughter that romantic partnerships in this industry weren't about emotion, they were about strategy. "Mia, in this business, who you date is part of your brand," Carmen had once said. "Choose partners who open doors, not ones who close them." It was a philosophy Sofia had adopted early in her career. In Hollywood, relationships were often transactional. The right partner could enhance your image and fast-track your career. The wrong one, a liability. Later that week at Luna Lounge, trendy West Hollywood hotspot for industry networking disguised as socializing, Sofia sat in her usual corner booth with Victoria Sterling, her closest friend and fellow agent. "Sofia, we need to talk about your dating life," Victoria announced as the waiters set down their drinks. "People are starting to notice. You haven't had a serious relationship since the whole Brandon situation." Victoria's concern wasn't about loneliness or heartbreak, it was about optics. In Hollywood, a successful woman was expected to pair herself with someone who matched her status or enhanced her profile. "I'm focused on my career right now," Sofia said evenly. "Building my client roster, romance can wait. Except, the right relationship could help your career," Victoria countered. "If you choose someone with connections, who aligns with your goals. It's not just love, it's leverage." Their conversation followed familiar patterns, the politics of appearances, the career calculus of dating, and the need to always think 3 steps ahead, romantically and professionally. That mindset was on full display during the Hollywood Hearts benefit, a high-profile charity auction at the Beverly Hills Hotel. The event raised money for children's education programs while doubling as a prime networking opportunity for the industry elite. Ladies and gentlemen, our next auction item, a walk-on role in the upcoming Martinez Productions film, donated by acclaimed director Carlos Martinez, announced the evening's celebrity host. Sophia spotted a familiar face, or rather, a familiar presence across the room. It was the same man from the gym, now standing near the hotel's service corridor. He looked perfectly at home in a security role, overseeing crowd flow and coordinating with event staff. His quiet authority and professionalism stood out, but she still couldn't quite place him. Why would someone like him be working security at a charity event, and also working out at Lead Fitness? She wondered, curious. Sophia approached the bar where he was in conversation with hotel staff, discussing safety procedures and guest logistics. His knowledge and confidence impressed the hotel coordinators. No small feat in an environment that demanded discretion and control. "Excuse me," Sophia said, interrupting politely. "Could you tell me where the ladies' room is?" "Of course, ma'am," he replied, gesturing toward the corridor. "Past the gold elevators, second door on the right." His tone was professional, respectful, but not overly deferential. It wasn't what she was used to from service staff. The interaction felt ordinary on the surface, but something about it unsettled her assumptions. "Thank you. I'm Sophia Martinez. By the way," she added, offering her name, a habitual move, in case the person was someone worth knowing in the industry. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Martinez," he said with a polite nod. "I'm Damon Washington." There was no flicker of recognition in his expression, no networking follow-up, no eager attempt to connect or climb. Just calm, self-assured professionalism. Sophia turned to leave, still wondering, who is this man, and why doesn't he care who I am? The collision between Sophia's assumptions and Damon's reality came during a night that would change everything. It began with a routine client dinner at Mastro's Steakhouse in Beverly Hills. Afterward, as Sophia made her way through the dimly lit underground parking garage, she noticed a van trailing her BMW. At first, she brushed it off as coincidence. But when the vehicle began matching her every turn, anxiety gripped her. Her heart raced as two men suddenly stepped into her path, blocking her exit. "Get out of the car, lady. This doesn't have to be hard. Cooperate," said the larger of the two, his body tense, his voice edged with desperation. This wasn't a simple robbery. Sophia saw it in their eyes. This was something far more dangerous. Her hands shook as she tried to reason with them. "Please, I'll give you my purse, my jewelry, whatever you want." But the men didn't flinch. One pulled out zip ties. "You're coming with us. Make it easy, or we make it hard." Terror surged through her. This wasn't about money. It was a kidnapping. Before she could scream, a voice echoed through the garage, calm, authoritative, and firm. "Gentlemen, I'm going to need you to step away from the vehicle and keep your hands where I can see them." From behind a concrete pillar, Damon Washington stepped into view. He moved with the fluid confidence of someone highly trained, his presence instantly shifting the power dynamic. The attackers hesitated, but only for a moment. What followed was a blur of motion. In less than 2 minutes, Damon neutralized both men with swift, calculated precision. Sophia watched, stunned, as he used expertly executed defensive maneuvers to subdue her would-be kidnappers. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" he asked, standing between her and the unconscious men just as police sirens wailed in the distance. "No, ... I'm okay," she said breathlessly. "But you saved my life. They were going to take me." Only now did it begin to sink in. The man she'd dismissed at the gym and at the charity event had risked his own safety to protect her. At the police station, Detective Maria Rodriguez's explanation brought more unsettling clarity. "Ms. Martinez, you were targeted by a kidnapping ring specializing in high-profile industry professionals. They select based on perceived wealth and media visibility, not anything you personally did." Sophia's blood ran cold. It hadn't been random. She'd been profiled, followed, and nearly taken. "Can you tell me more about the man who helped me? I realize I know nothing about him. Mr. Washington is a private security consultant, the detective said. He specializes in executive protection and is former military, with advanced training in threat assessment and tactical response. Sophia blinked. Her assumptions that he was Jim's staff or low-tier security were shattered. Damon Washington was one of the most respected private security professionals in Los Angeles. His client list included celebrities, CEOs, and dignitaries. He had the kind of qualifications people in her world relied on for their lives. Without his intervention, the detective added, your situation could have ended very differently. Shame flushed through her. She had dismissed Damon without a second thought, judging him based on his race and perceived social role. Now, the man she had overlooked had not only saved her life, but may have prevented future kidnappings by disrupting a broader criminal operation. I want to thank him, personally, she said. He left this, Rodriguez replied, handing her a business card. It read, Washington Security Consulting Executive Protection. Tactical response. Trusted by the world's most demanding clients. She stared at it for a long moment. Later, when she finally called the number, she found herself uncharacteristically nervous. Mr. Washington, I just wanted to thank you properly for what you did. I realize now that I made a lot of unfair assumptions about you. I'm glad you're safe, Ms. Martinez, he said, his tone matter-of-fact. That situation could have ended badly without quick action. His humility struck her. No boasting, no lecture. Just calm, competent professionalism. May I ask why? Do you work out at Lead Fitness? She asked, hesitantly. I assumed. Wrongly? I train there for the physical conditioning my job requires. Executive protection isn't just about presence, it's about being able to respond to threats effectively. As their conversation continued, Sophia learned that Damon had a background in special operations and had built a thriving security consulting firm protecting some of the world's most influential people. His expertise wasn't an accident, it was built through years of disciplined training, real-world experience, and quiet, relentless professionalism. I feel foolish for not recognizing who you were, she admitted. Most people make assumptions, he replied. What matters is whether they're willing to reconsider them. His answer, gracious and grounded, exposed an uncomfortable truth. Sophia had spent her career navigating a world that valued image, connections, and optics above character. Damon had no need for status symbols. His value spoke for itself. And in that moment, Sophia began to see him and herself differently. The fallout from Sophia's near-kidnapping rippled quickly through the entertainment industry. Whispers surfaced in private meetings, brunches, and boardrooms, not about the criminals or her narrow escape, but about her response to the man who had saved her life. The murmurs became words during her first lunch with Victoria Sterling after the incident. Sophia, darling, we're all so relieved you're safe. Victoria began over kale salads at the Ivy. Her voice was warm, but her eyes flickered with unease. But some people are concerned about how you're handling the aftermath. Sophia sipped her mineral water, already bracing for the direction this would take. Victoria leaned in slightly, her tone lowering. Word is, you've been talking about your rescuer a lot, praising his character, his professionalism. That's admirable, of course. But, Sophia cut in. But some industry insiders are wondering whether this experience might be affecting your judgment, especially regarding appropriate professional boundaries. There it was. The implication that her admiration for Damon Washington, a black man, outside her industry, her circle, and her race, was making some people uncomfortable. Victoria, Sophia said, her tone steady. Damon saved my life. Not by luck or coincidence, but through his expertise, his training, his judgment, and yes, his courage. I think people should know who he is and what he stands for. Victoria exhaled gently, as if dealing with a stubborn client. Of course you're grateful, but some people are interpreting your enthusiasm as something more. You know how perception works in our world. Sophia stared at her, the implication hitting like a slap. You're suggesting that acknowledging a man's heroism is a sign of emotional instability because he's not from our industry. I'm suggesting, Victoria said carefully, that developing a relationship of any kind with someone outside the expected circles might complicate your professional reputation, and that's something you need to think about. The words stung more than Sophia wanted to admit, because they weren't just Victoria's. They echoed in boardrooms, casting offices, and even her own home. Later, during her weekly phone call with her mother, Carmen Martinez voiced a similar concern, but in the coded, careful language of family worry. Mia, I heard what happened. I'm so thankful you're okay, Carmen said. Isabella's mother told me it was intense, and that you've been speaking highly of the man who helped you. Yes, Mama. Damon Washington. He's a highly trained professional, and he risked everything to stop those men. I'm glad he was there. Truly, Carmen said. But Sophia, be careful. Sometimes dangerous situations create emotional confusion. Gratitude can feel like something more. You've worked too hard to build a certain kind of life. Don't jeopardize that. Sophia paused. You mean, don't fall for a black man who works in security? Her mother flinched. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The silence that followed said more than either of them could. Sophia had spent her life moving through a world where appearances mattered more than substance, where relationships were evaluated based on optics, not character. But something had shifted. Damon had shifted it. The transformation crystallized the day she attended the California Security Professionals Conference. The ballroom was filled with people she never would have encountered in her previous world: security consultants, law enforcement leaders, cyber intelligence officers, and Damon Washington, standing at the podium, commanding the room with the same quiet authority he'd shown the night. He saved her life. Effective protection isn't just about responding to threats, Damon said to the crowd. It's about preventing them, anticipating vulnerabilities, building systems that keep people safe before they even realize they're at risk. He outlined strategic models for threat assessment and protocols that had prevented dozens of attacks. The room nodded, not in polite applause, but in deep, professional respect. Sophia sat in the back, stunned. This wasn't a bodyguard. This wasn't a guy in a gym. This was a leader, a professional with a mind for systems, strategy, and sacrifice. After the presentation, she approached him during the networking reception. Damon, she said, her voice quiet, I owe you an apology. I had no idea about the scope of your work, your reputation. Your presentation was incredible. Thank you, Sophia, he said with a nod. Most people outside the industry only see the dramatic moments, but the real work happens in the quiet spaces, the incidents that never make headlines. I've been measuring people using very narrow standards, she admitted. Ones I didn't even realize were so shallow. Everyone starts somewhere, he replied gently. What matters is whether you're willing to learn. His grace struck her harder than his critique would have. He wasn't interested in shame. He was interested in growth. That night, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about what Damon had said and what he hadn't. The real test of her transformation came a few weeks later. They were meeting for coffee, as they had been regularly since the rescue. This time, Damon's demeanor was heavier. I wanted to let you know, he said, that there may be some fallout from the garage incident. Fallout. The men we disrupted were connected to a larger network. Word is, someone's put a target on me. It's nothing I haven't dealt with before, but it complicates things. You're saying, saving me put you at risk. It's not about blame, he said calmly. It comes with the territory. When you interrupt criminal operations, you sometimes become a target. Sophia stared at him, her chest tightening. Are you still taking clients? I am, but I've had to shift some assignments. I've lost a few. Damon, I can help. Security referrals, legal support, PR connections, whatever you need. I appreciate it, he said, but I've built my business on self-reliance. I can't risk the appearance of accepting charity. This isn't charity, she said, voice steady. This is networking. Strategic. Mutually beneficial. You protected my life. Let me help protect your livelihood. After a long pause, he nodded. I'll consider it. Sophia knew then that this wasn't about romance or gratitude anymore. It was about integrators and his dot. The moment she made it public came during a Women in Entertainment panel at the Beverly Hills Hotel. She stood before a crowd of producers, agents, and executives, the very people who had whispered behind her back. When we talk about power, we often limit it to money, status, or visibility, she said. But real power sometimes looks like quiet professionalism, like the man who risked his life to save mine not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. We need to expand our definition of excellence, of heroism, of worth. She didn't name Damon. She didn't need to, but every person in that room knew what she meant and who she had become. Gentlemen, I want to share something personal, something that's changed my entire perspective on courage and character. Sophia began, her voice steady, as she addressed the packed ballroom during the Women in Entertainment panel at the Beverly Hills Hotel. The audience executives, media insiders, and aspiring professionals settled into silence, sensing that this wasn't going to be a typical industry anecdote. 2 months ago, I was nearly kidnapped by individuals who targeted me because of my public profile and perceived wealth. My life was saved by a security professional, Damon Washington, whose quick thinking and courage stopped the attack before it escalated. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. People in this room understood the price of visibility. They knew too well how success could invite danger. But that night didn't just restore my personal safety, Sophia continued. It shattered something I hadn't realized was broken. My understanding of excellence. She paused. The room was quiet, watchful. I had dismissed Damon Washington as irrelevant to my world despite his professional accomplishments, his judgment, his expertise. Why? Because he didn't come from my circle. He wasn't an executive or a producer. He didn't walk red carpets. My assumptions blinded me to his excellence. A subtle ripple of discomfort spread through the audience, especially among the industry veterans who shared her former biases. Sophia saw it and pressed on. Ladies and gentlemen, true character isn't defined by social status or industry proximity. It's revealed in moments of pressure when there's nothing to gain and everything to lose. Damon Washington demonstrated more integrity, courage, and moral leadership in a parking garage than many of us will in our entire careers. There were nods of agreement, now some slow and thoughtful, others reluctant but genuine, to honor the kind of excellence our industry so often overlooks. I'm establishing the Washington Security Excellence Award recognizing professionals who demonstrate extraordinary courage and character in protecting others. This isn't about celebrity, it's about values. Her announcement landed with both reverence and shock. It was almost unheard of for someone in her position to publicly challenge the industry's unspoken social hierarchies. But Sophia didn't care about decorum anymore. She cared about truth. 6 months later, the effects of that truth had rippled into action. Sophia and Damon sat at their regular spot, a shaded table, at a Sunset Boulevard cafe, going over quarterly projections for their joint venture, a consulting firm that brought professional-grade security protocols to high-risk entertainment productions. The venture has exceeded our initial goals, Damon said, handing her a report. 12 film productions, 8 major events, 3 critical incidents prevented. Sophia scanned the report, pride rising in her chest, not just for the numbers, but for what they represented. They'd built something real. Not just a business, but a blueprint for partnership based on mutual respect and complementary strengths. Your expertise opened doors I didn't even know existed, she said. This isn't just consulting, it's infrastructure. You're helping an entire industry protect itself better. Their collaboration had evolved into something rare in both of their worlds. Genuine trust. It was professional. It was personal. And it was redefining the way people across both industries thought about leadership. Sophia, Damon said, voice low, I want you to know, this partnership has meant a lot to me. More than just business. She looked up, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. What do you mean? I mean, this has shown me that people can change, that relationships can evolve beyond social boundaries, and that when we choose to see each other clearly without prejudice, something powerful happens. Sophia felt emotion rise in her throat. Damon, I've spent years surrounded by power, players, but this partnership has taught me more about courage, integrity, and purpose than anything I've ever experienced in Hollywood. Their quiet moment was interrupted by a call. Sophia answered, listening carefully, then put the phone on speaker. Ms. Martinez, Mr. Washington, said a voice on the line, polished and authoritative. This is Rachel Morgan, Executive VP at Helio Studios. Your consulting work has caught our attention. We're interested in an exclusive contract security protocols for our upcoming slate of high-profile productions. We'd like to meet this week to discuss terms. Sophia and Damon exchanged a look. The moment was symbolic. The industry that had once questioned her judgment was now reaching out to both of them, not out of charity, but out of respect for their results. Thank you, Sophia replied. We'll make time. As the call ended, she smiled. They hadn't just built a business. They had changed the narrative. Appropriate, she finished, her tone crisp beneath a veneer of concern. Effective communication isn't just about ideas, it's about knowing how and when to share them. Captain. Marcus Jackson stood still, absorbing yet another rebuke cloaked in professionalism. His file was spotless. His evaluations by other flight instructors praised his instincts and data-driven tactics. But none of that seemed to matter in Colonel Morrison's command climate. Not when innovation came from the wrong background, the wrong voice, the wrong assumptions about who deserved to shape strategy. Yes, ma'am, he replied, his voice even, but the light in his eyes dimmed slightly. Rebecca turned on her heel and strode toward the simulator. Her command posture was immaculate, each step deliberate. She didn't notice, or perhaps chose not to notice, how the younger pilots who had witnessed the exchanged glances of restrained discomfort. They had seen the pattern before. Guidance for some, gatekeeping for others. That evening, Colonel Rebecca Morrison returned to her on-base residence. The setting sun painted the desert in hues of bronze and crimson, but her focus remained locked on tomorrow's strategy briefing. She moved with precision, as always, pouring tea, reviewing files, ignoring the faint echo of something she couldn't quite name. Doubt. She shook it off. Like desert sand from boots, her family's legacy, the Air Force's traditions, her own rise through the ranks all reaffirmed the righteousness of her standards. Marcus Jackson was not being punished. He was being shaped, molded into a pilot worthy of the title. Yet the phrase he'd used earlier haunted her. Diverse tactical perspectives. Was there room in her perfectly ordered world for ideas not born of legacy? For excellence that didn't look like her own? Meanwhile, Captain Marcus Jackson sat alone in the mission planning bay, reviewing the feedback she'd given. He'd heard the subtext, felt the coded language, but quitting wasn't in his nature. He wasn't here to fit in. He was here to lead. And others were starting to notice. Captain Sarah Williams, once firmly within Rebecca's sphere of influence, lingered by the door. Jackson, she said softly, I reviewed your simulation breakdown. That maneuver, the inverted counterpitch, followed by delayed engine throttle, it's brilliant. He looked up, surprised. Thanks. I wasn't sure it would ever make it past the theory stage. She hesitated. Rebecca's not wrong about protecting standards, but sometimes protecting means evolving too. Maybe it's time some of us spoke up. Back at Edwards Air Force Base, storm clouds both literal and metaphorical were gathering. The Pentagon had requested a squadron demonstration for international observers, and Command had selected Captain Jackson's innovative tactics for testing. Rebecca was stunned. Overruled, the brass wanted a new face, representing future readiness, a pilot who embodied innovation and inclusion. And despite her misgivings, the orders came down. Let Captain Jackson lead the exercise. It was a test not just of tactics, but of command itself. Would Rebecca stand in his way, or finally recognize that excellence doesn't always wear the same uniform? Would you like the next scene to focus on? The demonstration flight and how Marcus's leadership reshapes perspectives. Rebecca's internal reckoning, breaking point, where the legacy narrative begins to crack. A parallel event where Sophia and Damon intersect with military circles, perhaps consulting for the event and adding an external voice that challenges Rebecca's assumptions, begun to burn as well. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. It was quieter, like a hairline fracture in reinforced glass, invisible at first, but spreading fast, threatening everything it supported. She stood still, staring at the runway. For the first time, Colonel Rebecca Morrison didn't feel pride in her authority or confidence in her command. She felt uncertainty, a dangerous emotion for someone whose life was built on certainty. Marcus Jackson had just rewritten what she thought was possible, and he had done it with brilliance, composure, and courage that no briefing style or legacy lineage could ever manufacture. That night, debriefing room, Rebecca entered the debriefing late. Medical teams had cleared Captain Jackson. The room quieted when she walked in. All eyes turned toward her, not in anticipation of leadership, but in judgment. Marcus stood at the head of the room. He looked exhausted, but composed. She saw the burns on his flight suit, the soot on his cheeks, the hollowed eyes of someone who'd faced death and saved others from it. Captain Jackson, she said, her voice measured. I've reviewed the preliminary reports. Your actions today. She paused. The next words caught between pride and guilt. They were nothing short of extraordinary. He met her eyes, but said nothing. I owe you an apology, she continued. The room stilled further. Your tactical foresight, your flight discipline, and your refusal to accept failure demonstrated the very best of what the Air Force should stand for. I failed to see that. I let my assumptions blind me. To your excellence, Marcus finally spoke. With respect, ma'am, you didn't just fail to see it. You tried to bury it. That landed like a silent explosion. Rebecca's face didn't change, but the words cut deeper than any reprimand she'd ever received from a superior, because they were true. 3 weeks later, Pentagon commendation ceremony, the national anthem echoed through the marble halls. Military brass, senators, and media lined the rotunda as Captain Marcus Jackson received the Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor Cluster. Cameras flashed. Speeches were given, but Rebecca stood at the back, no command spotlight this time, watching silently as the man she had spent months diminishing now became a national symbol of military heroism and modern leadership. She had been wrong, not just in her judgment of Marcus, but in her foundational belief that tradition guaranteed excellence, that pedigree was a proxy for worth, that maintaining standards required excluding voices that sounded different. Her entire philosophy shaken. Asterisk. Colonel Rebecca Morrison submitted a formal request to be reassigned, not promoted, to the Air Force Tactical Innovation Center in Arlington, Virginia. It shocked her peers, but it was no publicity move. It was a reckoning. Her first action at the Innovation Center. Review every rejected tactical report from non-traditional pilots, and her first invitation as guest instructor. Captain Marcus Jackson to teach a course on asymmetric flight logic, titled Redefining the Flight Envelope. Leadership Lessons. From the edge of the possible, a profound shift had taken place, quiet but irreversible, leaving space for unsettling questions about merit, character, and what it truly meant to serve with honor. By Tuesday morning, Rebecca stood in the bathroom of her family home in Colorado Springs, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The events of the previous day played on a relentless loop in her mind. Every assumption she'd held about competence, leadership, and aviation excellence now lay scattered like the wreckage from a downed aircraft. The Colorado Springs Gazette featured headlines celebrating the Thunderbird 7 emergency landing, praising the pilot's heroism in saving lives and protecting billions in defense assets. But the media missed the deeper story, the unspoken humiliation of a commander who had spent months dismissing a pilot, only to be proven devastatingly wrong by his extraordinary performance. Rebecca's phone buzzed with messages from Pentagon officials and fellow commanders, offering congratulations. But she couldn't bring herself to respond with the usual pride. Each word of praise for the successful landing felt like a subtle rebuke, a reminder of her failure to recognize Marcus Jackson's value when it mattered most. Later that morning, Lieutenant Williams arrived with coffee and base updates, settling into the family room with the usual ease of someone confident in the system. "Colonel, you look drained." "Yesterday must have been intense," she said. "Coordinating it was." "Illuminating," Rebecca replied cautiously, not ready to take credit for something she hadn't earned. "Thank goodness our emergency protocols are solid, but perhaps this shows we need to ensure our most seasoned pilots handle experimental aircraft." Rebecca flinched at her own words, hearing in Williams' voice the very prejudices she herself had once echoed. "Actually," she said, surprising even herself, "Captain Jackson's performance wasn't just competent, it was exceptional. His control and judgment were more sophisticated than most test pilots I've seen." Williams raised an eyebrow. "Jackson? From Detroit? How unexpected. I suppose even average pilots can rise to the occasion under pressure." "It wasn't luck," Rebecca said firmly. "It was mastery." That afternoon, driven by a curiosity she hadn't allowed herself to feel before, Rebecca reviewed Marcus's personnel file under the guise of an administrative audit. What she found dismantled even more of her biases. Marcus Jackson had graduated magna cum laude from the Air Force Academy, earned his pilot wings with distinction, flown combat missions in Afghanistan, and been recruited by the elite test pilot school before transferring to Edwards. His record was impeccable, consistently rated exceptional except in the subjective areas that had required her recommendation. On Sunday, during a family dinner filled with Colorado Springs military elite, the usual prideful chatter about leadership and Pentagon initiatives filled the room. But Rebecca could no longer join the conversation as she once had. "I saw something this week that changed how I think about evaluating pilots," she said, interrupting her father's usual speech about traditional command values. She described Marcus' emergency landing and his flawless execution under impossible conditions. Her family's expressions shifted from interest to confusion to unease. "Well, naturally," her mother said, trying to soothe the moment, "he performed adequately under pressure, but I hope you're not overly grateful to someone simply doing their job." "He didn't just do his job," Rebecca said, her voice stronger than she expected. "He performed something close to a miracle. What he did, what he knew, was beyond what most pilots ever achieve, and we nearly lost him because I didn't recognize that." Her father regarded her with gentle concern. "Rebecca, I think the stress of the emergency might be clouding your judgment. One impressive performance doesn't change the realities of long-term pilot development." Even David Patterson, the ever-calculated strategist, weighed in. "It's admirable to acknowledge excellence, but don't let a single event override months of structured observation." Rebecca took a breath. What if those observations were wrong? The table fell silent. No one spoke, not because they didn't have opinions, but because no one had expected her to question the assumptions they all shared. She felt their discomfort, their confusion, their disappointment, like a weight pressing against her chest. But something inside her had shifted in a way that couldn't be reversed. That night, alone in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by photos of squadrons she'd led and medals she'd earned, Rebecca stared at the ceiling, no longer sure of what she once believed. The silence was deep and unfamiliar, and in that silence, something real began to grow. "What exactly are they evaluating, ma'am?" Marcus asked. Rebecca took a steadying breath and listed the areas: experimental propulsion systems, cognitive load, management during hypersonic flight, and physiological adaptation to GI forces beyond current aircraft limits. She forced herself to continue. "All areas where your test pilot record and emergency performance show superior expertise." Without hesitation or resentment, Marcus began outlining technical frameworks addressing each criterion. His analysis was thorough, his understanding of cutting-edge aviation systems evident in every recommendation. The solutions he proposed were practical and strategic knowledge that would normally take years to master. These performance protocols should address their immediate concerns and position our pilots favorably for advanced program selection. He concluded, "I can have detailed technical assessments ready by tomorrow morning, if you'd like." Rebecca stared at him in quiet awe. "You're willing to do that, after everything?" "Ma'am, my duty is to serve our nation's air superiority mission. Professional excellence serves everyone's goals." His steady, principled response reflected a commitment to service that transcended personal grievances. Despite mistreatment, his dedication to aviation and his integrity remained intact. That evening, Rebecca stayed late, reviewing Marcus's technical analyses. Every page revealed a depth of expertise she'd been too biased to see: advanced, tactical thinking, and an understanding of experimental flight systems that surpassed most squadron commanders. His recommendations reflected years of specialized study and operational experience. When base security made their final rounds, they found Rebecca still at her desk, surrounded by evidence of Marcus's exceptional capabilities. "Working late again, Colonel Morrison?" asked Sergeant Martinez, the security supervisor. "Yes, reviewing some important technical assessments." "Captain Jackson's work, I'd guess." "That young man's got a brilliant aviation mind," Martinez replied. "Always helping folks around here. Helped my son with his Air Force Academy application last month." Rebecca looked up, surprised. "He did?" "Oh, yes, ma'am. Captain Jackson volunteers with the Academy prep programs. Wrote my boy's recommendation letters, too. Helped him get in." As Sergeant Martinez continued his rounds, Rebecca remained in the darkened office, finally seeing Marcus Jackson for who he truly was, not the marginal outsider her prejudices had cast him as, but a remarkable pilot, an individual whose intelligence, character, and sense of duty far exceeded anything she had achieved. The man who'd saved 6 lives and billions in military assets was the same man she had tried to sideline. The real tragedy wasn't just what she had done to him, it was what the Air Force had been denied by her failure to recognize his abilities. For the first time in her privileged military career, Rebecca Morrison understood she'd met someone genuinely superior to herself in every way that mattered, and her months of dismissal had only revealed the poverty of her own character in contrast to his unwavering excellence. The success of Marcus Bill's silent thunder evaluation should have been a moment of triumph. Instead, it triggered a military crisis threatening everything Rebecca had built. News of her collaboration with Marcus, and, more importantly, her public acknowledgement of his superior expertise, spread rapidly through Air Force leadership. The call from General Morrison came Thursday morning, summoning Rebecca to an urgent family meeting. She entered the familiar study of her childhood home. walls lined with military honors and presidential photographs, which now felt like a tribunal. "Rebecca, your mother and I are deeply concerned about your recent command decisions," her father began, settling behind his mahogany desk with the authority of decades in uniform. "General Matthews mentioned your unusual deference to Captain Jackson during the Pentagon evaluation." Retired Colonel Patricia Morrison sat with military precision, her expression a blend of maternal concern and institutional alarm. "Darling, people are talking. Apparently you've been treating this pilot as if his opinions carry equal weight to yours." "His opinions do carry equal weight, Mother. In several technical areas, his expertise surpasses mine." The admission hung in the air like a classified secret, carelessly exposed. Her family exchanged worried glances, their alarm unmistakable. Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Morrison, fresh from a Pentagon rotation, didn't mince words. "Rebecca, I don't understand what's happening to you. The guy performs one emergency landing, and suddenly you think he's an aviation genius. That's crisis response, not long-term assessment." "It wasn't just one landing, Kevin. He's been demonstrating exceptional capabilities for months. I was too prejudiced to see it." Brigadier General Morrison leaned forward with practiced authority. "Rebecca, gratitude is one thing, but you're letting emotion cloud your military judgment. The young man did his duty. That doesn't mean you elevate him beyond his station." His station. The phrase crystallized everything. Rebecca was beginning to realize about her family's worldview. Their comfort depended on rigid hierarchies, keeping people like Marcus in predetermined roles, no matter their actual ability or contributions. "What if his appropriate station is squadron command?" Rebecca challenged. "What if he's more qualified than most wing commanders in the Air Force?" Her mother's laugh was perfectly measured, a gentle sound delivering maximum dismissal. "Sweetheart, don't be dramatic. He may be competent at his level, but leadership requires institutional understanding, something that comes from the proper background and military heritage." Just then, Lieutenant Colonel David Patterson arrived for dinner, as though summoned by the family's emergency protocols. Rebecca carried her characteristic confidence and social authority into the room, but she could feel the weight of the conversation before it began. "Rebecca, I've been hearing concerning reports from Air Force circles," her father began. "Several general officers have expressed alarm over your perspective on pilot development." "My perspective?" she asked. "Your ability to maintain proper command distance from subordinates," he clarified. "This Jackson fellow seems to have made quite an impression, but successful leadership requires emotional objectivity in personnel decisions." Dinner stretched on 4 hours, each family member and military acquaintance contributing their version of the same warning. Marcus, they agreed, had performed adequately in his assigned role. But Rebecca's recognition of his superior abilities posed a threat to the delicate authority balance that sustained their elite military culture. "Consider the practical implications," her father insisted. "If you continue elevating this pilot beyond his appropriate role, what message does that send to the rest of your squadron? To the general officers who expect you to honor the traditional advancement pathways?" Rebecca found herself fighting against the crushing weight of tradition, the very structure that had shaped her entire identity. "What if those traditional pathways are the reason we fail to recognize and promote our most capable people?" she countered. Her mother's voice was gentle, but firm, the practiced tone of someone accustomed to managing family crises. "Rebecca, darling, think about your promotion to full colonel. Think about your future as a general officer. David's been patient with this phase you're going through, but even his understanding has limits." The evening wore past midnight, with each person taking turns explaining why Rebecca's newfound respect for Marcus was dangerous, misguided, and potentially destructive to everything the Morrison family had built through generations of distinguished service. "Think about your legacy, sweetheart," her mother pleaded. "The Morrison name has carried meaning in the Air Force for 4 generations. You can't expect to maintain that reputation while abandoning the standards that created it. General Patterson, David's father and a longtime family ally, delivered the most direct warning over brandy and cigars. Rebecca, he said, the Air Force operates on time-tested principles. When wing commanders begin deferring to junior officers, regardless of individual talent, it disrupts institutional order. It undermines the chain of command. Driving back through the quiet desert darkness toward Edwards, Rebecca felt the crushing weight of disapproval from everyone she'd ever trusted. None of them were malicious. They genuinely believed they were protecting her from a catastrophic mistake that would jeopardize her career. But something inside her had shifted. In the weeks since the Thunderbird 7 emergency, she had seen Marcus' character too clearly to unsee it, witnessed his capabilities too directly to deny them, experienced his calm professionalism under impossible pressure too personally to dismiss. Friday morning arrived with a formal review before the Air Force Personnel Board, a meeting orchestrated by senior leadership to pressure her back into compliance with established norms. Colonel Morrison, General Henderson began. We've received concerning reports about recent command decisions potentially compromising pilot development protocols and squadron morale. The room felt different now, not the domain of natural authority it had once seemed, but a chamber where comfortable hierarchies and institutional blindness were defended under the guise of tradition. The choice was becoming unavoidable. Return to the safety of her privileged military world, or risk everything to become the kind of leader Marcus' conduct had shown her was possible, one worthy of respect, not because of heritage, but because of principle. Later that evening, Rebecca asked Marcus to meet at a small diner in Lancaster neutral ground, far from military protocol, where the constraints of rank wouldn't dictate their conversation. She chose a corner booth, a deliberate setting for an honest reckoning. Marcus arrived in civilian clothes, carrying himself with the quiet dignity that had always marked him, uniform or not. His eyes reflected intelligence and weariness, born of experience. He approached the table with the same measured respect he had shown her throughout months of systematic dismissal. Colonel Morrison, he greeted her as he slid into the booth across from her. You have to admit, ma'am, I'm curious about this meeting. The carefully rehearsed apology Rebecca had planned evaporated under his steady gaze. Please, call me Rebecca, and I owe you an apology for everything I've done undermining your career. Everything is a broad category, Marcus replied gently. Could you be more specific, ma'am? The question forced Rebecca to confront the full scope of her behavior. For months, I dismissed you under the guise of military standards. I took credit for your innovations. I excluded you from opportunities for advancement. I consistently undermined your contributions, even in situations where your expertise far exceeded my own. Marcus studied her face, searching for sincerity beneath the polished surface she had long presented. What changed? He asked. You saved 6 lives and billions in military assets, defying every assumption about what was possible, she answered. Then I realized the pilot I'd been dismissing as inadequate was, in fact, more knowledgeable about experimental systems than most test pilots I've worked with, and more dedicated to service than anyone else in our command. So this conversation is about guilt, he asked, the question cutting deeper than she expected. Partly, but mostly it's about recognition. I need you to know that I see your worth now. I'm horrified by my own blindness. Marcus leaned back, his expression turning grave. Rebecca, I appreciate your honesty, but you need to understand something. Your treatment of me wasn't just personal dismissal. It was systematic marginalization. I endured it every day while serving my country. Rebecca felt tears sting her eyes. I know. I'm so sorry. Do you know? Marcus asked quietly. Do you understand what it feels like to excel at aviation and be consistently overlooked for advancement? To offer valuable innovations only to have others take credit? To maintain professionalism while your contributions are erased. No, Rebecca admitted. I can't imagine what that felt like. It felt like being made invisible, Marcus said. Like watching my military worth, determined not by my capabilities, but by your comfort with acknowledging them. They talked for over 2 hours. Marcus shared experiences Rebecca had never considered. The extra pressure he faced to exceed expectations, just to be considered competent. The professional isolation born of being excluded from advancement opportunities. The way her behavior had quietly given others license to question his qualifications. I've been serving in environments like this my entire career, Marcus explained. Proving myself over and over again to commanders who decided long before they met me that I didn't belong in leadership. What made your treatment so difficult was how calculated it felt, how personal the dismissal became. Rebecca, in turn, began to share the shock of her own awakening. The painful recognition of how her prejudice had shaped her leadership and what it might cost if left unchallenged. Rebecca Morrison sat across from Marcus Jackson in a small Lancaster diner, the neutral setting a deliberate escape from the rigid military world, where rank and regulation had always defined their relationship. Marcus arrived in civilian clothes, carrying himself with the quiet dignity of a man whose worth was independent of uniform or circumstance. He approached the table with the same measured respect he'd shown throughout months of dismissal, though weariness lingered in his intelligent eyes. "Colonel Morrison," he greeted, sliding into the booth. "I have to admit, ma'am, I'm curious about this meeting." "Please," Rebecca replied, her rehearsed apology evaporating under his gaze. "Call me Rebecca, and I owe you an apology for everything I've done to undermine your career." "Everything's a broad category," Marcus answered gently. "Could you be more specific, ma'am?" She drew a steadying breath. "For months, I dismissed you under the guise of military standards. I stole credit for your ideas, blocked your advancement, and ignored your contributions, even when your expertise outpaced my own." Marcus studied her face, searching for sincerity. "What changed? You saved 6 lives and billions in assets during that emergency. I saw a pilot I'd written off do the impossible. Then I learned you knew more about our flight systems than most test pilots in the program. You showed me a level of grace under pressure I couldn't deny. So, this is about guilt." His question cut deeper than she expected. "Partly, but mostly it's about recognition. I need you to know, I see your worth now. I'm horrified by my own blindness." Marcus leaned back, his expression serious. "I appreciate your honesty, but understand something, Rebecca, my worth was never dependent on your recognition. I've been an exceptional pilot, with or without your validation. I know that now, but it matters to me to say it, and to mean it." "Why?" Rebecca struggled to find the right words. "Because I want to be a commander whose respect is worth having. I want to build a career based on truth, not comfortable lies. Because you're remarkable, and I want to be the kind of leader worthy of serving alongside people like you." Marcus considered her in the diner's harsh lighting. "Respect isn't something you declare. It's something you prove, through consistent action." "Then let me prove it. Let me show you I can change." "What exactly are you asking for?" "I'm asking for a chance to earn your forgiveness. To demonstrate that privilege can be used to protect, not to oppress. That people can change. And maybe, that one day you might see me as an equal worth, trusting." Marcus was quiet, his gaze steady. "That's a lot to ask. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild easily, especially not in this system. I know, but the same courage that saved those lives, I'm hoping it'll let you believe in redemption too." As they left the diner, Marcus paused at the door. "If we're going to rebuild anything, it has to be based on genuine equality and mutual respect. No guilt-driven promotions, no token gestures. I won't accept charity disguised as opportunity. I wouldn't offer that. What I'm offering is a partnership to build something better than either of us could alone. Marcus smiled faintly and extended his hand. Then let's see what you're really made of, Colonel Morrison. Asterisk at 0530. On a gray Monday, General Henderson's voice shattered the quiet in Rebecca's quarters. Colonel Morrison, report to the Pentagon. Immediately. There's been a serious incident involving Captain Jackson, a national security matter. Her stomach tightened as she raced through possibilities. At the Pentagon's classified briefing room, a tribunal of senior officers sat with grim, unreadable expressions. Captain Jackson, General Henderson announced, has been accused of violating security protocols and compromising classified information related to Operation Silent Thunder. That's impossible, Rebecca countered. Captain Jackson holds the highest clearance. He's never violated protocol. The accusations came from Lieutenant Colonel David Patterson and Captain Sarah Williams, alleging unauthorized access to classified files and suspicious activity. Over the following hours, a nightmare unfolded: manufactured evidence, fabricated witness accounts, and a coordinated attempt to destroy Marcus's career. Rebecca recognized it instantly. A carefully orchestrated character, assassination by those threatened by his excellence. This is a smear campaign, Rebecca declared, fury in her voice. Both Patterson and Williams have clear motives to eliminate him. That's a serious allegation, Colonel, Henderson replied coldly. Do you have proof? The proof is in his record, his loyalty, and his actions. He risked his life to save others weeks ago. But the generals weren't there for justice. They'd already decided his fate. The language of security protocols and operational integrity masked a deeper truth. Marcus Jackson threatened their comfortable hierarchies by the end of the 4-hour session. His suspension was unanimously approved. Rebecca sat alone in a Pentagon corridor, staring at portraits of Air Force heroes. Knowing most had compromised for the same system she now refused to defend. That evening, she found Marcus packing underarmed escort, his dignity intact despite the humiliation. I suppose you've heard, Marcus said when he saw her. I've heard lies, she replied, and I've seen how far they'll go to silence anyone who threatens them. This isn't your fight, Rebecca. You'll only destroy your own career standing with me. My career means nothing if it can't be used to protect good people from injustice, she said. Tomorrow morning, I'm resigning my commission and demanding an Inspector General investigation into what they've done to you. For the first time in her military career, Rebecca Morrison wasn't choosing safety or tradition. She was choosing integrity, knowing the road ahead would be brutal, but hers to walk, and she'd do it with her head high. Rebecca arrived at her hotel just before noon, engagement ring in hand, and a marriage proposal carefully planned. David greeted her with a mix of concern and impatience. Rebecca, I know you're going through a difficult time, he began, but I want you to know I'm willing to stand by you through this episode. She met his gaze steadily. David, this isn't an episode. This is who I've decided to be. You're choosing unemployment and professional disgrace over a man accused of compromising national security. I'm choosing to stand by someone whose character surpasses everyone in our military circle combined. David's expression shifted to alarm. Rebecca, are you telling me you have feelings for this man beyond professional respect? She hesitated, then, for the first time, let herself say it aloud. Maybe I do. Maybe I've fallen in love with someone who embodies everything I want to become. The admission surprised them both. David said nothing more. He left without another word, carrying with him the last remnant of Rebecca's old life. That afternoon, Rebecca drove to a veterans organization where Marcus had begun volunteering after his suspension. She found him in a small office, helping disabled veterans navigate the maze of military disability claims. Watching him patiently serve those forgotten by the system reshaped her understanding of what military service was truly meant to be. Rebecca. Marcus looked up, startled. What are you doing here? I resigned this morning, she said quietly, and I filed a formal request for a full Inspector General investigation into the false charges against you. I couldn't stay in an institution willing to sacrifice you to protect its comfort. Marcus stepped into the hallway, his face unreadable. You resigned. Rebecca, you didn't have to do that. I'll find a way to rebuild my career. This isn't about rebuilding careers, Marcus. It's about deciding the kind of person I'm going to be. I couldn't live with myself knowing I stayed silent. They sat outside the Veterans Center, watching former service members arrive for assistance. Rebecca shared her decision and a plan she'd been forming in the back of her mind. I want to start something new, a veteran advocacy organization that values justice over connections. One that serves those who need help, not those who can grant favors. Marcus gave a faint, thoughtful smile. That's a beautiful dream, Rebecca. But starting from scratch is harder than you realize, especially when you're walking away from power and resources. I know, she said, feeling lighter than she had in years. But I have savings, contacts in veteran circles. And if you're willing, a potential partner whose skill and integrity surpass anything I could accomplish alone. Are you asking me to build this with you? I'm asking you to help me create the kind of advocacy we both wish existed. I'm asking you to teach me how to use my privilege to protect, not to harm. I'm asking you to be my partner in this work, and maybe, if you're open to it, in something more. Marcus studied her carefully, weighing months of evidence against his own caution. Starting an organization together would be complicated enough. Adding personal feelings makes it even more so. Everything worthwhile is complicated. The real question is whether you believe I'm capable of becoming the person you deserve, professionally and personally. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then stood as Rebecca extended her hand. He took it, rising until they stood face to face in the late afternoon sunlight, filtering through the Veterans Center windows. You've surprised me at every turn since that emergency landing, he said. I suppose I'm willing to be surprised again. ***. 6 months later, Marcus received a phone call that would change both their lives. The Inspector General's investigation had uncovered a coordinated conspiracy against him, leading to for Patterson and Williams. Even more significantly, the inquiry revealed systemic discrimination embedded within the Air Force's promotion systems. Captain Jackson, said General Rodriguez, the new Air Force Chief of Personnel, the Secretary of the Air Force has ordered your immediate reinstatement with promotion to Major, effective today. Additionally, you're being offered command of a new experimental test squadron at Edwards. A year later, Marcus received another call, this time announcing his selection for Lieutenant Colonel and command of the 412th Test Wing, making him the youngest African-American wing commander in Air Force history. During the promotion ceremony, General Matthews addressed the crowd. Colonel Jackson, your case has fundamentally changed how this Air Force evaluates and advances its best officers. Your courage and integrity have made us all better. Rebecca watched from the audience, pride shining through her eyes. The man she had once dismissed now commanded the respect of the highest military leaders, not because of connections, but because of undeniable character and ability. ***. On a Thursday morning, Rebecca arrived 3 hours early for a Washington Post editorial board meeting. In her hands was a 7-page op-ed titled, Why I Left the Air Force to Fight Institutional Racism. It was a searing account of her journey from complicit officer to conscious advocate. Michael Thompson, the editorial director and a veteran journalist, reviewed her draft with cautious skepticism. Ms. Morrison, this is a powerful piece, but, I should tell you, we've already received calls from Pentagon officials. They're concerned about the wisdom of publishing this. Concerned about what, exactly? Rebecca asked evenly. About releasing what some consider classified details, and about perceived attacks on military leadership. Air Force Legal Counsel has already retained advisors to assess potential security risks. Rebecca had expected this. Her article detailed specific incidents of institutional racism in the Air Force, the systematic sidelining of minority officers, and the pattern of protecting corrupt leadership through weaponized security accusations. Every claim in that article is factually accurate and supported by the Inspector General's findings, she said. If the Air Force finds the truth inconvenient, that's precisely why it needs to be published. The meeting stretched for 5 tense hours as military lawyers combed through every line and editors challenged each assertion. Rebecca defended her statements with court-martial transcripts, IG reports, and promotion data that laid bare a long history of discrimination, masked by rhetoric about merit-based advancement. The evidence is overwhelming, she said, spreading documents across the table. The Air Force has systematically excluded exceptional minority officers, while protecting incompetence based on family name and connections. By noon, the Post agreed to publish her op-ed, though only after rigorous legal vetting. Rebecca's phone began ringing before she even reached her car. The Pentagon's demands for a retraction escalated into increasingly frantic attempts at damage control. Rebecca's mother called as she was driving to meet Marcus at their Veterans Advocacy office. "Rebecca, darling, what have you done? The entire military community is in an uproar over your expose. You need to issue a statement clarifying your position." "My position is perfectly clear," Rebecca answered, her voice steady. "I spent years participating in a system that wastes talent and perpetuates injustice. I won't pretend it's acceptable anymore." The article had gone live Friday morning, igniting immediate controversy throughout military and political circles. Rebecca's inbox overflowed angry emails from former colleagues, disappointed messages from Air Force Academy classmates, legal threats from military attorneys. But amid the backlash came unexpected voices of support, young officers of color thanking her for her courage, veteran advocacy groups inviting her to speak on military reform, and congressional aides reaching out about possible testimony. Most important was Marcus's call that morning. "Rebecca, I read your piece. You realize what this means, right? There's no going back." "I know," she said quietly, surprised by the profound sense of freedom that came with it. "I think that's the point." The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Invitations to military social functions vanished. Memberships in veteran organizations were revoked. Professional relationships built over decades disintegrated overnight. Rebecca found herself exiled from the privileged world that had shaped her since childhood. But in the ashes of her former life, something remarkable happened. She discovered who she truly was, without the safety net of rank, reputation, or inherited status. Working alongside Marcus to build their veteran advocacy organization, she felt more energized, more certain of her purpose, than she ever had in uniform. Their first major case involved a group of minority veterans filing discrimination claims against the Department of Veterans Affairs. The second tackled a coalition of women veterans fighting to expose sexual assault cover-ups in military justice. The third, a class action lawsuit, challenged racial bias in court-martial proceedings. "We're not just building an organization," Rebecca told a reporter covering their work. "We're proving that military excellence doesn't require exclusion, that justice is strategic, and that integrity matters more than connections." Standing in their modest office, surrounded by thank you letters and photos of veterans they'd helped, Rebecca felt a satisfaction she'd never known in all her years chasing promotions and prestige. She had traded social status, family approval, and financial security for something far more valuable: the chance to be a veteran whose success lifted others rather than excluding them, whose work reflected her values, and whose love story defied every assumption about who deserved respect and recognition. The article remained a source of controversy, but it also drew the attention of military justice reform advocates, progressive veteran groups, and congressional leaders. Rebecca was soon testifying before Congress about structural bias in military promotions, consulting with Pentagon officials, and joining a growing movement determined to dismantle the barriers holding back qualified minority officers. 3 years after leaving the Air Force, Rebecca stood before a mirror in the home she now shared with Marcus, adjusting the collar of a simple business suit. That evening, they would receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom for their organization's work on behalf of military families. The woman in the mirror no longer measured her worth by rank or inherited privilege. Her Air Force dress blues had been donated to a veterans museum. The decorations she once coveted now collected dust in a display case she rarely opened, but her reflection revealed something far more valuable: eyes that carried the depth of hard-won wisdom and a heart steady in its purpose. Marcus appeared in the doorway, straightening his tie with the quiet grace that had first drawn her to him during that emergency landing years before. "Ready for this?" he asked, adjusting her collar with familiar affection. "I've been ready for this since the day I realized everything I thought I knew about military service was wrong," Rebecca replied. They drove to Washington together, passing the Pentagon, where she had once worked, Arlington National Cemetery, where their advocacy had ensured proper honors for forgotten veterans, and onward to the White House. The ceremony took place in the East Room, flags of every military branch standing sentinel along the walls. Rebecca watched as fellow advocates were honored for their work in civil rights, veteran health care, and military family support. When their organization's name was called, the room erupted in applause. Rebecca and Marcus walked forward together, their success symbolizing more than advocacy victories. It was proof that values-driven leadership could thrive while challenging entrenched systems. 3 years ago, Rebecca said into the microphone, her voice steady, before an audience of Pentagon officials, lawmakers, and veterans, "I believed military excellence meant preserving hierarchies, protecting institutional comfort, and excluding others from opportunity. I was wrong." She glanced around the room at former Air Force colleagues still wrestling with her choices, family members who had slowly come to understand, and new allies who had believed in her from the start. "Our organization succeeds because we recognize excellence wherever it exists, because we serve veterans overlooked by traditional systems, and because we've learned that the best solutions come when every voice has a seat at the table." Later, at the reception in the Rose Garden, military families approached to share stories of lives changed by their advocacy. General Jackson, now Marcus's commanding officer, after another promotion, found Rebecca, his eyes bright with emotion. "Rebecca, thank you for seeing my worth when others wouldn't. Your worth was always there," she told him. "I just learned how to recognize it." As evening fell, Rebecca and Marcus stood on a White House balcony, overlooking the city lights, their hands entwined. "Any regrets?" he asked, offering her a glass of champagne from the reception. Rebecca considered it seriously. Her bank account was smaller. Some family ties remained strained. Former colleagues still whispered about betrayal and misguided activism. But she felt no emptiness for the life she'd left behind. "Not a single one," she said, raising her glass to the future. Some Air Force friends still clung to the hope this was just a phase, that Rebecca would eventually marry someone more suitable, fall back in line with old expectations. But as she stood beside Marcus that evening, she realized there was nothing temporary about what she'd chosen. "I regret that it took me 34 years to understand what you've known since childhood," she said softly. "I regret the cruelty I inflicted on you and others like you. And I regret the opportunities I wasted to use my privilege for something meaningful." Marcus reached for her hand, his voice gentle. "That's not what I meant." Rebecca smiled, hearing the question beneath his words, Any regrets about leaving that old life behind? Any second thoughts about choosing truth over comfort, love over expectation, justice over inherited position? No, she answered quietly, not a single one. 2 years later, they married at Arlington National Cemetery, surrounded by veterans they'd fought for, military families who had become dear friends, and advocacy colleagues who had witnessed their partnership grow from professional collaboration to something far deeper. As Rebecca walked down an aisle formed by honor guards from every service branch, she reflected on the journey that had brought her there. She had lost a prestigious military career, the approval of powerful circles, and the weight of inherited expectations, but in return, she had gained something far more valuable, a life shaped by integrity, a mission driven by justice, and a love that transcended the artificial boundaries she'd once accepted, without question. The woman who had once grounded a black pilot for daring to be different had learned that her dismissal spoke to her own limitations, not his unworthiness. And in the years since, she'd discovered that the most important transformations don't come from changing others to meet our expectations, but from changing ourselves to become worthy of those whose courage and character exceed our own. In choosing Marcus, Rebecca had chosen not just a partner, but a way of serving veterans that recognized extraordinary potential in overlooked places, valued substance over connections, and proved that human worth can't be measured by family legacies, academy rankings, or military records. Their love story wasn't a simple tale of a reformed elitist and a forgiving colleague. It was about two people who had found the courage to see past their conditioning, to build something real across lines of difference, and to prove that the most meaningful changes begin not when we demand others fit our world, but when we open ourselves to become worthy of theirs. As they danced their first dance, as husband and wife, surrounded by a community that had watched their love grow through shared struggle into enduring partnership, Rebecca leaned close to Marcus and whispered words it had taken her a lifetime to understand. "Thank you for waiting while I learned to see your excellence, and for believing I could become someone worthy of your love." Marcus smiled, a warmth in his eyes that illuminated the entire room. "Rebecca, we taught each other. You gave me hope that even the most privileged hearts can choose justice over comfort, and I gave you the chance to discover who you are, once everything that doesn't matter falls away." The music swelled around them, the moment tender and unhurried, their love story complete, their life together just beginning. Two people who had learned that the most beautiful transformations happen not when we remake others, but when we have the courage to remake ourselves. Rebecca sat across from Marcus in the dim light of the diner, wrestling with the conversation she'd long avoided. "What made your treatment so painful," she confessed, "was how deliberate it felt. It wasn't just institutional bias. It was personal dismissal, and I was part of it." She found herself recounting the moment her assumptions had begun to unravel, witnessing Marcus's extraordinary skill during that emergency landing, the discomfort of discovering his superior qualifications, and the growing humbling realization that her privilege had blinded her to realities she'd never questioned. "My family and colleagues think I'm having some kind of command breakdown," Rebecca admitted. "They can't understand why I'm questioning everything I was taught about merit, leadership, and military advancement." "And what do you think?" Marcus asked quietly. "I think I'm finally growing up as a leader," she said. "I'm realizing that command authority without moral courage is meaningless, that institutional success without true recognition of excellence is hollow. And I've been living in a bubble, one that protected my comfort at the cost of other people's careers." Marcus was silent for several moments, then placed two complex flight scenarios on the table between them. "Rebecca, I need you to understand something important. My worth has never depended on your recognition. My capabilities don't require your validation. I've been an exceptional pilot, whether you acknowledged it or not. I know that." "Now," she said, voice low but steady. But I need you to know that I see it, I acknowledge it, and I respect it. He studied her face carefully. Why does that matter to you? Rebecca struggled to explain feelings. She was only beginning to understand. Because I want to be a commander whose respect is worth having. Because I want to build a military career based on truth, not on preserving comfortable hierarchies. Because you're remarkable, Marcus, and I want to be someone worthy of knowing you. Marcus searched her expression in the harsh fluorescent light. That's a beautiful sentiment, he said at last. But respect isn't something you declare. It's something you demonstrate through your actions, consistently, over time. Then let me prove it, Rebecca said. Let me show you I can change. That I can become someone better than the officer who dismissed you. What exactly are you asking for, Rebecca? She took a deep breath, knowing her next words would shape both their futures. I'm asking for a chance to earn your forgiveness. To prove that people can change. That privilege can be used to fix what it once helped break. And that maybe, one day, you might be willing to see me as someone worth serving alongside, as an equal. Marcus held her gaze. That's asking a lot. Trust, once broken, isn't easily rebuilt, especially in a military culture where hierarchy and authority run so deep. I know, she said, but I'm hoping the same character that compelled you to save those lives might also let you believe in the possibility of redemption. As they stood to leave the diner, Marcus paused by the door, thoughtful. If we're going to rebuild any kind of professional relationship, he said, it has to be based on genuine equality and mutual respect. I won't accept token gestures, guilt-driven promotions, or charity disguised as opportunity. I wouldn't offer those, Rebecca replied. What I'm offering is a chance to serve together as equals, to learn from each other, and to build something better than either of us could alone. Marcus extended his hand, a small smile breaking through his reserve. Then let's see what you're really made of, Colonel Morrison. As they shook hands, Rebecca felt something fundamental shift inside her, a new understanding of leadership, respect, and what it truly meant to recognize another's worth. The road ahead would be difficult, requiring her to dismantle every assumption her privilege had protected. But for the first time in her career, she was choosing growth over comfort, and truth over hierarchy. That clarity was shattered at 0530 hours the following Monday. The shrill ring of the phone cut through her sleep like an emergency klaxon. Colonel Morrison, General Henderson's voice barked. You're to report to the Pentagon immediately. There's been a serious incident involving Captain Jackson. It's a national security matter. Rebecca, dressed in her service dress uniform, heart pounding, and caught the earliest transport to Washington. Her mind raced through every possible scenario, but none prepared her for what awaited in the classified briefing room. A tribunal of stern-faced generals sat around the table, their expressions ranging from disappointment to thinly veiled fury. Colonel Morrison, General Henderson began, his voice cold and formal. Captain Jackson has been accused of violating security protocols and potentially compromising classified information related to Operation Silent Thunder. Rebecca felt the world tilt beneath her feet. That's impossible, sir, she managed. Captain Jackson holds the highest security clearance and has never violated protocol. The accusations come from Lieutenant Colonel Patterson and Captain Williams, Henderson continued. Both report Jackson accessing classified files outside his authorization and potentially sharing information with unauthorized personnel. Over the following hours, a nightmare unfolded: manufactured evidence, orchestrated accusations, and a coordinated character assassination. David Patterson claimed to have caught Marcus accessing classified systems after hours, downloading files related to experimental aircraft programs. Sarah Williams backed the accusation, offering testimony about Marcus's so-called suspicious behavior and inappropriate questions regarding sensitive projects. Evidence suggests systematic intelligence gathering, declared General Crawford from Air Force Security, far exceeding normal operational requirements. Furthermore, Captain Jackson's background and associations raise additional concerns about possible foreign intelligence connections. Rebecca stared at them, all horror clawing at her throat. It was a setup, and she knew exactly who was behind it.